House Bill 4040 relating to investment for economic development, appropriating money and declaring an emergency.
Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of House Bill 4040B. Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 4040 continues a very important conversation about Oregon's economic future. In the last year, several of us have been meeting with Oregon business leaders. We traveled around the state asking business leaders, community leaders, entrepreneurs what they needed, what was holding them back from expanding their businesses and hiring Oregonians. We went to a lot of different places around the state, and we heard a lot of very interesting stories. Not surprisingly, some of the details were different in those different places, but some very common themes emerged quickly. Businesses need access to capital, and Oregon's programs need to be more flexible, better coordinated, and more accountable. We heard about how disconnected different programs in Oregon are, how one agency might have a program, but another one had a different one, and they weren't connected. They weren't talking to each other. If we did know about a program in a particular agency, it might have sideboards that were so rigid that prevented it from being deployed to help an urgent and emerging opportunity. We heard about a lot of those examples. House Bill 4040 creates the Oregon Growth Board with specific and qualified membership and charges it with the task of coming back to the 2013 legislature with recommendations. Why should you care? This bill was built based on what we heard in your communities. It will improve how Oregon uses our tax dollars and our lottery dollars to help create jobs and build an economy in which Oregon can compete on the world stage and win. The Growth Board will develop strategies to use public resources as a carrot to attract substantial private sector capital to Oregon. That'll help create more jobs and a more stable and competitive future for all of us. The bill prioritizes coordination, making sure that agencies are talking with each other about what they're doing, about how we're spending money on economic development, and on what Oregonians are getting for that investment. And it brings increased focus on accountability through robust ROI criteria in the decisions that the board makes. Colleagues, I'm confident that all of us would put jobs and employment at the top of our agenda. And I'm even willing to go so far as to say that most of us would agree that the state has a role at times in creating the conditions for job creation and economic development. In fact, voters have even directed us to do that. So the question is how we can best approach that task. And the Oregon Investment Act is an important step as we continue on the task of improving our efforts in that regard. I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Reed, do you wish to close?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The road that has brought us to this point has been a long one. We started more than a year ago, and as I think about that, I think about the roads we drove to Klamath Falls, to the Dalles, to Ontario, and other parts of the state. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we heard a lot of different conversation, a lot of different points of view on this general question. Even today on the floor, we heard a lot of different perspectives, and I want to thank those who were willing to share them. I think some of the legitimate criticisms and concerns that have been expressed are, in a way, an argument for the bill, that there is a need to improve the way we do economic development, to boost our effectiveness and coordination. So my hope is that even those who are who might describe themselves as skeptics or critics, if the bill passes and takes effect, will take the opportunity to be involved in the conversation that I hope will continue. And it is a road that we're not through with. If we are successful here, we'll be back with recommendations and further discussion about what makes the most sense. So my thanks go to all of you colleagues and to all the people who've been involved in developing this bill inside the building and out. You've heard about some of the interest groups and stakeholders who've been involved in our conversation, as well as the communities around the state. They have been a huge part of the success of this bill and obviously will play a critical role in the continuing conversation. But in a session that has been characterized by a series of budget choices that I think very few of us are happy with, this is a bill that we can all go home and be very proud of. As we continue to boost the effectiveness, efficiency, and accountability of our economic development programs, I think we can loudly and enthusiastically tell the rest of the world what we already know, that Oregon is a great place to do business. I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.